As my opponent stated, the modern technological era has given rise to such concepts as human genetic engineering, a method of gene manipulation designed to specialize our bodies for biological superiority. However, research into this practice is unworthy of federal investment because it is unnecessary, immoral, and counterproductive. To begin with significance, genetic disorders do not require our attention as desperately as my opponent claimed. According to Stanford University's Tech Museum of Innovation, genetic diseases such as Huntington's are rare. Thanks to natural selection, these genetic diseases tend to get weeded out of populations over time because afflicted carriers are more likely to die before reproducing. This evolutionary process represents the national strengthening of our species over time. Lethal genetic diseases are phased out of the gene pool because they prevent their hosts from passing on the malady to offspring. Our genes are already strengthening naturally, and therefore interference with gene adaptation via genetic engineering is unnecessary. In fact, natural selection is the superior system as its results are not tainted by human error. So natural selection takes place over thousands of years, and if we were to adapt our own genes, we would do it over one generation at most. And this would lead to mistakes and things like that. According to Carolyn Williams of the Yale New Haven Teachers Institute, science promises to achieve in overnight laboratories the process of natural selection which would otherwise take millions of years in nature. Research predicts that one day geneticists may be able to remove traits from human beings that are considered undesirable and replace them with more acceptable ones. For the success of the species, genetic variation is required. If there is a sudden environmental change, there might be a need for a different, unexpected combination of genes that would maximize the prosperity of our species. If we have eliminated these previously undesirable genes through genetic engineering, the survival of our species would be in jeopardy. We are clearly not ready to pursue such power, even if we believe we are only curing diseases. Furthermore, despite my opponent's claim that genetic irregularities are only a source of emotional distress, many people in the families and cultures of the genetically abnormal believe that these idiosyncrasies are a part of their identity, and eliminating them would stifle their individuality. Among these advocates of this genetic diversity are the families of autistic people. The tech confirms the genetic origins of autism. There's clearly a genetic part to autism. It tends to run in families, and identical twins who share the same genes are much more likely to have both autism, than fraternal twins. So genes are involved. Psychology Today shares a quote from the mother of an autistic child. Autism, with a capital A, to me says that I accept my child wholly. I celebrate his differences and quirkiness. I advocate diversity. I try to empower him. I'm proud of his successes no matter how small they seem. I hope he holds on to the compassion he has in his heart into adulthood. I do not think he needs fixing. I am proud that he is my son, and sometimes I am humbled by that very same thought. Though autistic people face daily challenges, the condition is an integral part of their genetic makeup, and it contributes to who they are as people. Rather than falling into hopelessness and emotional despair, their families and friends support them and look to them as a symbol of hope and natural human improvement. Another prime example against the universal sorrow of genetic afflictions is the deaf community, who fervently defend their status as a culture as opposed to a group of victims. First, the National Center for Biotechnology Information confirms the cause of deafness is frequently genetic. Deafness is an etiologically heterogeneous trait with many known genetic and environmental causes. Genetic factors account for at least half of all cases of profound congenital deafness. Professor of Philosophy and Bioethics at Monash University, Robert Sparrow, states, according to several reports, deaf couples have been known to seek genetic counseling and testing in an attempt to ensure that their children will be born deaf. Other sources suggest that deaf parents may celebrate in neonatal wards upon learning that a child will be unable to hear. Now, rather than considering their genetic abnormality to be an emotional burden, many deaf people embrace it and find joy in their family's conditions. Therefore, in various cases of genetic abnormality, those affected find positive aspects of their conditions, quite contrary to my opponent's portrayal. Moving on, while the lack of funding is a factor in the insufficiency of human genetic engineering research, the main preventative issue is the moral uncertainty. As Williams says, currently the battle is to be able to freely and legally complete the research that will eventually lead to this kind of genetic engineering in humans. At this point, Members of this society, like those in Canada and Europe, raise questions in protest of the ethics and the morality of such practices. The ongoing moral debate about mankind's manipulation of life is the primary reason that the research into human genetic engineering has not progressed further. Lastly, government funding would not solve the problem of genetic disease. This is true for two reasons. First, the allocation of federal funds is a delicate balance, and to commit a significant amount to research into genetic engineering would necessitate reducing funding in other essential areas, such as education. The U.S. Department of Education explains its role in the educational system. ED works hard to get a big bang for its taxpayer-provided bucks by targeting its funds where it can do the most good. This targeting reflects the historical development of the federal role in education as a kind of emergency response system, a means of filling gaps in state and local support for education when critical nation needs arise. So the Department of Education carefully distributes finances to ensure the prosperity of the American students. In periods of economic distress such as this one, this emergency funding is paramount to local and state governments. If these assets were reduced in favor of scientific research, our educational system would deteriorate even further. Thus, it would be less capable of training young scientists who could advance the aforementioned research. This action would give resources to one area but remove them from another, and is therefore unproductive. The second reason this proposition would not solve the problem is that genetic diseases would likely still occur in spite of the increased resources. As my opponent mentioned, most interest is focused on germline genetic engineering, meaning the prevention of disease in children. This is where the funding would theoretically be allocated, and therefore somatic genetic mutations, which are mutations that occur throughout the course of someone's life, would still take place. Even if government funding covered somatic genetic engineering research, treatment would not be significantly different than our current treatments for such ailments. According to a Franklin College report, both the President's Commission for the Study of Ethical Problems in Medicine and Biomedical and Behavioral Research and the European Medical Research Councils concluded that somatic cell gene therapy is not fundamentally different from other therapeutic procedures such as organ transplantation or blood transfusion. Thus, somatic genetic mutations will continue to manifest in people, and governmental funding does not solve this issue. So overall, we've seen that increasing governmental funding into genetic engineering research is unnecessary, misguided, and ultimately ineffective. Thank you.